Hey guys, what's up? James here from Embark, and today we're going to take a look at protecting your time and energy by setting boundaries. Time is something you should obviously try to minimize wasting. It is super important, and each block of time you only get once and then it's gone. And your mental health is really important as well. It's really important for performance at work, in your career, and also for, when you're at home with your spouse and your kids and things like that. You want to have good mental energy and have good juju all round. So some people are a constant drain on your time and energy, and it's whether they mean to or not. There's one solution that's really simple and easy and will help you deal with time wasters and people who, selfish people who suck your energy, and it will help you be productive and happy. That solution is setting boundaries, enforcing them without guilt. All right, so setting boundaries and enforcing them without guilt. So let's break that down into the three parts. 1, setting boundaries. If people are sucking your energy away, drain on your mental health and wasting your time, you need to end that immediately. You can never get back your time, so don't let people take it from you. Ask a billionaire if they'd give up all their wealth that they have right now to be 20 or 30 years younger, and they'll immediately say yes. No hesitation whatsoever. It is the most important commodity that you have. Understanding this really helps with procrastination and really ingrained in your mind why you need to deal with time wasters and to not let them have a little bit. You've got to cut it immediately. Setting a boundary is simply laying down a rule of how you deal with people and how you deal with tasks. Think of it as a bubble around your mental energy, time and health, and that's a bubble that other people cannot enter. That is your boundary. So let's take a look at an example just to make it easier to visualize and understand. An example of a simple boundary is you've agreed to have friends round until 9 p.m. and said that they have to leave at 9 because you've got an early meeting in the morning and it's important and you need to be fresh and awake for it. Everyone knows the deal. They're turning up, they know they have to leave at 9, as soon as 9 comes, they got to go. However, this boundary is completely useless if you don't enforce it. As I said earlier, setting boundaries and enforcing them without guilt. So, the second part, enforcing the boundaries. Again, this is a very simple step, but some people struggle with it because, like with the first step, it takes a little bit of confidence. It takes a little bit of assertiveness. And those are certain traits that aren't inherent in everyone. And therefore, you should practice them. If you practice them, you will get better at them. You'll become more assertive. You'll become more confident. And if you lack assertiveness, you might not even set a boundary in the first place. In my opinion, that's why the world is sort of divided between the selfish and the selfless. The selfless are too easily pushed over, and the selfish don't even realize that they're being selfish most of the time because there's no line that's been drawn for them to cross. They don't know they're crossing the line because there's no line there, because there's been no boundary set, because those people are selfless and just aren't very assertive and just sort of let themselves get walked over. So back to the example. You've set your boundary 9 p.m. People turn up and it gets to 9 o'clock. Your friends say, we're halfway through the bottle of wine. We want to stay a little bit longer, we'll just finish it off and we'll be out by 9:30, 9:45. So now you're at a crossroads because you have the choice of whether to enforce it or to not enforce it. And this is where it gets a bit tricky because it doesn't have to be the same every time. Some days you might be enjoying yourself and live a little, you let yourself allow a little bit of slippage. 9, well, what's half 9, what's 10, doesn't really matter. I'm chilled, let's go with it. And maybe you knew that it always takes a little bit extra, so you wanted everyone gone by 10, but you said 9 because you knew it would carry on for a little bit after that. So there's no right answer in this scenario. But if you did want to enforce it, this was where you'd have to assert yourself and enforce that boundary. And you need to enforce the boundary as sternly as it needs to be enforced in order to actually be enforced. You can't do it half-heartedly. You can't ask for it to be enforced as a boundary. You need to tell them, that's the boundary, I'm enforcing it, this is how it goes down. And that's where that assertiveness comes into it. This is more easily done with people you know, friends, family, things like that, because you know their personality types. So you know how stern you'll need to be in order to enforce that boundary. You'll know how they'll act, you know what your friends, family, co-workers, whatever, you know how they act, so you'll know how to enforce that boundary without taking it too far. In this example, it might just be putting a cork in the bottle, handing it back to the guys, giving them a couple of snacks for the journey home, and they're on their way. Or, it might be a bit more forceful. You might have to say, look guys, half bottle of wine, I'm just going to pour it down the drain. If you don't get out, 9 o'clock's the time to leave. Get out now. You're my friends, I love you. Fuck off. Bye. It depends how you want to do it. It depends how you want to take it on, basically. As I said, this will be dependent on people's personalities, on the mood of the situation, things like that. You shouldn't be scared to enforce a boundary, especially early on. If you enforce a boundary once or twice, people get the picture, they'll respect your boundaries from then on. You won't have to enforce them because they'll know how you operate. They'll know when you say, sorry, got to get up early, 9 o'clock's the limit, they'll know 9 o'clock's the limit. 8:55, they'll start getting their jackets, they'll say thanks for a good night, and off they go. You just got to remember that this is your time and this is your mental health. That is important, and you have to, it might seem a little bit mean at the time, but you have to think long term. If you give people an inch, they'll take a mile. There's truth in that. If you allow that slippage to happen, that extra 30 minutes here, that, oh, I'm late, 15 minutes late here, that time all adds up every single week, and then suddenly you're missing out on that time. You're getting stressed, you're getting anxious, you've got the mental health just deteriorating because you want to be doing something else and you can't because this person's wasting your time. And the point with this is that you haven't chosen the time. So if you spend 2 nights a week with friends for 3 hours, that's 6 hours that you've chosen to spend time doing. It's important to spend time with your friends. 6 hours, I want to spend time with my friends this week, I'm going to do 2 nights, chill with them, and you've chosen that. But the hours you haven't accounted for are the ones that eat into other things, and that's when it causes issues. And those issues are the ones that you mitigate when you set a boundary. So you set the boundary, you enforce it without guilt. Alright, so let's take a look at not feeling guilty. This is important, of course, and again, it will be easier if A, you learn to become more assertive, and B, understand that your time is precious. The guilt might be there for a few times that you enforce a boundary, but it will fade once you see the benefits, and also when you see the fact that 95% of the time it doesn't really affect the person. They don't care that you've enforced the boundary. They just get on with it. So in my example, they would just head out, grab some food, or they would head to a bar. They wouldn't care that you're kicking them out at 9 o'clock. So it's much less scary once you've seen the results of doing it once. So don't feel guilty. They knew the rules when they were coming round. You said to them, sorry guys, early start, 9 o'clock. So they knew that was what was happening. Don't feel guilty for just being like, hey, this is what reality was. I told you, and now here it is. So don't feel guilty about that. Don't feel bad for actually having the balls to follow through on your word. So my last little trick with boundaries, and one that I use all the time, is setting a boundary with a consequence to breaking it. So the consequence is what you will enforce, but they ultimately have the choice whether to break through that boundary or not. So I really like this because it's upfront, it's honest, and most importantly, it takes any guilt away because you put the ball in their court. They're the one making the decision. They're the one deciding to ignore the rule on the boundary or to go ahead with it. Sometimes these boundaries are good for where there's bigger issues with families and things like that, but you can use it for smaller issues as well. So I'll give you an example here now. So in my old line of work where I worked at a student letting agency, you'd occasionally get an angry parent call up the office. They'll have no idea what their son or daughter is living in accommodation wise, sort of the standard of the property, and they'll have no idea what the communications between us as the agency and the students, but they'd be on the phone all guns blazing because their child hadn't given them all the facts. So I'd answer the phone and I'd immediately set a boundary. Sir, I'm more than happy to deal with this issue for you and look into this for you, but I am in no way obligated to sit here and deal with this unpleasantry, and I will end this conversation if it continues. So 90% of the time they'd carry on yelling and spewing profanities down the phone, and so I'd hang up. So I set the boundary, I told them, I said the consequence of that boundary being broken, and they acted. They made the decision to break the boundary, go through that boundary, and therefore, without guilt, boom, that's the consequences. You literally asked for it. You asked for that consequence. Boom, so done. Phone rings again. Obviously, I know the number, I know what's going on. Hi, James, how can I help you today? More shouting, more profanity, boom, hang up. So it normally take 2 to 3 times before they realised, hey, this guy's not messing around, maybe I should just try a different angle. And the only way to get a path to resolution was by treating me like an actual person. And I let them know, and eventually that's what would happen. And they would always finish the conversation thanking me for being helpful, and would always get to a resolution. Happy days. But I would set that boundary, enforce it, and it's a brilliant way to do it. It's a great hack by giving them the consequence and let them know and let them choose, and then the guilt is out of your hands. So in summary, number 1, practice being more assertive and confident when setting boundaries. 2, once you've set boundaries with someone, they get the picture, respect you pretty quickly. 3, don't feel guilty. Your mental health, energy and time is way too important to let people abuse it. And number 4, set boundaries with enforceable consequences so that everything is clear and people understand that you take your time seriously. So that's it from me, guys. That is, how to set a boundary, how to enforce it without guilt. Hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, please make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. We have new videos coming here every single week. I've been James for Embark, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.